Queen Elizabeth I, the last of the Tudors, is a figure who looms large over English history. Known as the Virgin Queen, she presided over a golden age of art, exploration, and military triumph. Her reign, lasting 45 years, saw England transformed into a global power and gave rise to a national identity that endures to this day. But the story of Elizabeth's life is also one of personal tragedy, political maneuvering, and a fight for survival in a world dominated by men. Elizabeth's story begins not with her birth, but with the tumultuous rule of her father, Henry VIII, whose quest for a male heir would shape the course of her life and the fate of England. Elizabeth, born on September 7, 1533, entered the world under a cloud of expectations and deep disappointment. Henry VIII's obsession with producing a male heir had already led him to divorce his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, and break with the Catholic Church, establishing himself as the supreme head of the Church of England. This bold, unprecedented move set the stage for years of religious upheaval. His new queen, Anne Boleyn, was expected to deliver the male heir that would secure the Tudor dynasty. Henry's divorce from Catherine, the official acts that separated England from the papacy, and Henry's marriage to Anne Boleyn include historical reenactments where Henry commands his court, and clergy like Thomas Cranmer support the break with Rome. Show the religious and political tension mounting as Henry's decision rocks the European Catholic establishment. When Anne gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth, Henry's disappointment was palpable. Elizabeth was the king's second child, and despite the immediate celebration, the reality was grim. Elizabeth's birth was seen as a failure by many, including her father. Still, Elizabeth was christened with great pomp and ceremony at Greenwich, with godparents like Archbishop Cranmer and the Dowager Duchess of Norfolk. Elizabeth was only 2 years old when her mother, Anne Boleyn, was executed in 1536, accused of treason, incest, and adultery. Anne's enemies, both at court and abroad, had conspired to bring her down. Henry, in his desperation to remarry and produce a male heir, supported these charges. Anne's trial was swift and brutal, and she was beheaded at the Tower of London. Though Elizabeth's early years were shadowed by tragedy, her intelligence and ambition were recognized early on. Unlike many women of her time, she was granted a comprehensive education, one that would prepare her for the challenges ahead, even though at the time, no one could have predicted that she would one day become queen. Elizabeth's education was influenced by the humanist ideas of the Renaissance. Guided by her stepmother Catherine Parr, who ensured she received rigorous instruction, Elizabeth was taught by some of the finest tutors in England. These included the famed scholar Roger Ascham, who described Elizabeth as a diligent student with a sharp and inquisitive mind. By her teenage years, Elizabeth was fluent in Latin, Greek, French, and Italian, a rare achievement even among the educated elite. She was particularly fond of languages, using them as a tool for diplomacy later in her reign. Her ability to converse with ambassadors in their native tongues earned her respect and admiration throughout European courts. Catherine Parr, Henry VIII's sixth and final wife, had a profound influence on Elizabeth, both as a mother figure and as an intellectual mentor. Catherine, a devout Protestant and advocate for women's education, took a personal interest in Elizabeth's development. She encouraged her to read and write extensively, especially on religious matters, shaping Elizabeth's Protestant identity. After the death of Henry VIII in 1547, England entered a new period of uncertainty. Elizabeth's half-brother, Edward VI, ascended the throne as a Protestant king, but his reign was short-lived. The throne then passed to Mary I, a staunch Catholic who viewed Elizabeth not only as a political rival but as a symbol of Protestant resistance. Edward VI, still a child, ruled under the guidance of Protestant regents like his uncle, Edward Seymour, Duke of Somerset. Under Edward's reign, England became more strictly Protestant as policies were introduced that suppressed Catholic practices. Elizabeth, despite the religious tension, maintained a relatively low profile during Edward's reign. She kept her Protestant faith but avoided open confrontation with her Catholic opponents. When Edward VI died in 1553, England faced a succession crisis. Many Protestants supported Lady Jane Grey, but Mary, Elizabeth's half-sister, soon gained the upper hand and seized the throne. Mary, determined to restore Catholicism, immediately reversed Edward's reforms. For Elizabeth, Mary's reign was a time of profound danger. Elizabeth's Protestantism, combined with her status as a legitimate heir, made her a target. In 1554, Elizabeth was implicated in Wyatt's Rebellion, an uprising against Mary's marriage to Philip II of Spain. Though there is little evidence that Elizabeth was involved, Mary suspected her of being a focal point for Protestant dissent. Elizabeth was arrested and imprisoned in the Tower of London. For 2 months, her fate hung in the balance. In 1558, Mary I died, leaving behind a country in turmoil. England was divided along religious lines, financially weakened, and diplomatically isolated. Elizabeth's ascension to the throne brought hope to many, but it also posed significant challenges. At just 25 years old, Elizabeth would have to navigate a minefield of political, religious, and international conflicts to secure her rule. Elizabeth's coronation on January 15, 1559, was a carefully choreographed event designed to send a clear message. The new queen was divinely appointed, legitimate, and determined to unite her fractured kingdom. The ceremony combined elements of both Catholic and Protestant traditions, reflecting Elizabeth's desire to maintain stability in a religiously divided nation. When Elizabeth took the throne, she inherited a kingdom in crisis. England was financially weakened, religiously divided, and diplomatically isolated. Yet from the beginning, Elizabeth showed herself to be a pragmatic and intelligent ruler. She understood that in order to consolidate her power, she needed to balance the competing interests within her realm. Here, we go deeper into the issues Elizabeth faced. The fallout from Mary's reign had left the country in deep debt, and religious divisions between Catholics and Protestants threatened to tear the kingdom apart. On top of this, England was diplomatically isolated, with Catholic Spain and France viewing Elizabeth's Protestant regime with hostility. Elizabeth's cautious approach to governance is highlighted. Visuals show her convening her first parliament, where she worked to restore England's finances by selling off royal lands and re-establishing diplomatic ties. Elizabeth I's greatest challenge early in her reign was to bring religious stability to England. The country had been rocked by decades of religious upheaval under her predecessors. Her father, Henry VIII, had severed ties with Rome. Her brother, Edward VI, had aggressively enforced Protestantism, and her sister, Mary I, had sought to return England to Catholicism, brutally persecuting Protestants. Elizabeth's solution was the Elizabethan religious settlement, a delicate compromise that would shape the country's faith for centuries to come. In 1559, Elizabeth introduced her religious settlement, an attempt to walk a fine line between the extremes of Catholicism and Protestantism. The settlement consisted of two key acts passed by Parliament: the Act of Supremacy, which reaffirmed the monarch as the supreme governor of the Church of England, and the Act of Uniformity, which mandated the use of the English Book of Common Prayer in all churches. This pragmatic approach was designed to minimize rebellion and unrest. Elizabeth's settlement was moderate in many respects. While it leaned towards Protestantism, it retained enough Catholic elements, such as vestments and certain liturgical practices, to appease more conservative subjects. Nevertheless, many Catholics still refused to recognize Elizabeth as the rightful monarch, viewing her as an illegitimate daughter of Anne Boleyn. This discontent would fester into plots and rebellions, but for the moment, Elizabeth's position was secure. The greatest Catholic threat to Elizabeth's throne came from her cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots. A Catholic queen with a legitimate claim to the English throne, Mary was a focus of Catholic hopes for restoring the true faith in England. After being forced to abdicate her throne in Scotland in 1567, Mary fled to England, seeking Elizabeth's protection. This turned out to be a fateful decision. For 19 years, Mary was held in various castles and manors across England as Elizabeth grappled with the potential threat she posed. Over time, Mary became the focal point of several Catholic plots to assassinate Elizabeth and place her on the throne, culminating in the infamous Babington Plot of 1586. This led to Elizabeth's reluctant decision to order Mary's execution, a move that had profound consequences for the rest of her reign. Elizabeth's reign was marked by the rise of England as a global power, and nothing demonstrated this more dramatically than the defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588. The confrontation with Spain was the culmination of years of tension between the Protestant queen and the Catholic superpower, led by King Philip II. Philip II of Spain had once been married to Elizabeth's sister, Mary I, and had hoped to keep England within the Catholic fold. However, Elizabeth's Protestant policies, her support for Dutch rebels fighting against Spanish rule, and the constant raids by English privateers like Sir Francis Drake on Spanish treasure ships led to irreparable conflict. Philip, urged by the Pope to restore Catholicism to England, began planning an invasion in the 1580s. The Spanish Armada, a massive fleet of over 130 ships, set sail for England in July 1588, carrying thousands of soldiers for an invasion. England, with its smaller navy, appeared outmatched, but under the leadership of commanders like Lord Howard and Sir Francis Drake, they employed innovative tactics, including the use of fire ships to break the Spanish formation. After several days of fierce fighting, a combination of English tenacity and unfavorable weather scattered the Armada, leading to a historic victory. After the victory, Elizabeth delivered one of her most famous speeches to her troops at Tilbury, inspiring her subjects with the immortal words, "I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and of a king of England too." This moment encapsulated Elizabeth's leadership, her resilience, and her ability to unite her people during a moment of national crisis. Elizabeth's reign is often remembered as a golden age of English culture, marked by flourishing art, literature, exploration, and theater. Under her rule, England not only expanded its influence abroad, but also experienced a cultural renaissance at home. William Shakespeare, perhaps the most famous figure of the Elizabethan era, wrote many of his greatest plays during Elizabeth's reign, including Hamlet, Macbeth, and Romeo and Juliet. The Queen was a patron of the arts, and her court became a hub of creative activity, where poets, playwrights, and musicians flourished. Elizabeth's reign also saw the beginning of England's expansion into the New World. Explorers like Sir Walter Raleigh and Sir Francis Drake embarked on voyages of discovery, establishing English colonies in the Americas and bringing back tales of far-off lands. These expeditions laid the groundwork for England's later imperial ambitions. While Elizabeth I is celebrated for her political acumen and cultural contributions, her personal life was equally complex and fraught with challenges. The Virgin Queen chose to remain unmarried throughout her life, a decision that would shape both her reign and her legacy. From the outset of her reign, Elizabeth faced relentless pressure to marry and produce an heir. Her advisors, courtiers, and foreign powers all urged her to consider potential suitors, seeing marriage as a means to secure political alliances. Prominent candidates included Philip II of Spain, the Duke of Anjou, and Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester, her childhood friend and rumored lover. Robert Dudley held a special place in Elizabeth's heart. Their relationship, however, was complicated by the untimely death of Dudley's wife, Amy Robsart. The circumstances surrounding her death raised suspicions, and Elizabeth's closeness to Dudley made their relationship a subject of gossip and scandal. Despite her affection for him, Elizabeth ultimately chose to keep him at arm's length, wary of the political repercussions their union might entail. Elizabeth carefully crafted her image as the Virgin Queen, using her single status to assert independence and power. She portrayed herself as married to her country, declaring that her subjects were her children. This clever positioning allowed her to wield power without the constraints that marriage would bring. Elizabeth's portraiture, adorned in elaborate gowns, with the Tudor rose symbolizing her lineage, served to reinforce her identity as both a queen and a woman of strength. As Elizabeth entered the later years of her reign, the weight of age, loss, and political strife began to take a toll. Yet, her steadfastness and determination remained unyielding, even as she faced challenges that threatened to unravel her life's work. Elizabeth endured the loss of several key figures during her reign. The deaths of Robert Dudley, Sir Francis Drake, and Sir Walter Raleigh were particularly poignant, as each had played significant roles in her court and in the expansion of England. These losses weighed heavily on her, yet Elizabeth continued to govern with resilience, drawing upon her inner strength to guide her through these personal and political trials. As the years passed, tensions with Spain reignited, especially with the ascension of Philip II's daughter, the Catholic Queen of England, which caused further anxiety. The execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, had made Elizabeth a target for assassination attempts and plots, adding to the unease in her court. In her final years, Elizabeth's health began to deteriorate, and she faced the reality of her mortality. The loss of her power over the years, coupled with her isolation, led to bouts of melancholy. Yet, even in her decline, she remained a symbol of English pride and resilience. Elizabeth never named an heir, a decision that kept her court in suspense and underscored her complex relationship with the concept of succession. Elizabeth I died on March 24, 1603, at Richmond Palace, after 45 years on the throne. Her death marked the end of the Tudor dynasty and the beginning of the Stuart era. Despite the uncertainty surrounding her succession, Elizabeth's reign is remembered as a time of cultural and political flourishing. The legacy of the Virgin Queen endures, shaping the national identity of England and establishing a model of female leadership in a male-dominated world. Elizabeth I's legacy is one of strength, resilience, and unparalleled achievement. She navigated the treacherous waters of politics, religion, and culture to create a kingdom that would flourish long after her reign. As a leader, she defied the norms of her time, leaving an indelible mark on history that continues to inspire and captivate.